Here with you all. All right. Thanks for the invitation to share. And I'm just going to speak freely from the heart, mostly as a storyteller this morning. And I want to tell two stories. The first story is primarily a story from my own life. And that's the story I'll begin with. And then I want to expand that story into a much larger story. I think a much more significant story, probably the most remarkable human story I've ever heard, and still continues to impact me after decades of contemplating this story. I want to begin. I'll just share my screen. I think it's always helpful to know from where someone speaks. And this is home for me. My family has been in this valley in what is known as Kamloops now for 3 generations. But this is the ancestral traditional territory, unceded land of the Secwepemc people, Secwepemcúlecw, and I'm grateful to be here. I also want to begin with just an acknowledgement about story. I had the privilege of doing some learning with Richard Wagamese, wonderful Ojibwe novelist and writer. And Richard talks a lot about story, and in one of his reflections, he says this, all that we are is story. From the moment we're born to the time we continue on our spirit journey, we are involved in the creation of the story of our time here. It is what we arrive with. It is all we leave behind. We're not the things we accumulate. We're not the things we deem important. We are story, all of us. What comes to matter then is the creation of the best possible story we can while we're here. You, me, us, together. And when we can do that, and we take the time to share those stories with each other, we get bigger inside. We see each other. We recognize our kinship. We change the world one story at a time. So let me tell you a story. And in a few moments, I'm going to share who some of these people are on the screen and tell a little bit about who they are, because I come not just with permission, but with a blessing to tell a story that is not my story directly. So I want to honor all of these different wonderful reflections and learning that has been gracing my life. And I want to acknowledge all of these people. But here's where I want to begin with my own story, how my story maybe intersects with this larger story. So let me tell you this story. I was about 13 years ago or so. I was sailing in the Gulf Islands, and it's wonderful to be with this community from Victoria, from the island, because it's a place I love to spend time, and all through the these amazing islands. And I was piloting the boat, and it's my friend John's boat, and we were actually approaching Active Pass, and so I was paying attention to where the BC ferries were coming out, and he has this wonderful large sailboat, and I was paying attention to the comings and goings of the different triangles on my screen representing the different boats. And John was watching me. He says he was watching me for about 10 minutes. And then finally he said, Dan, you got to look around. Like, you are totally absorbed in this wonderful computer screen, this navigation system he has on his boat. And John said, it is like a glass bubble. You get pulled into that world and you think it's somehow a real world for a brief period of time, he said. And what you miss is logs in the water, maybe a kayaker around the corner, maybe something that doesn't show up on the radar screen, maybe the fact that the GPS isn't all that accurate when you get in close. At times, maybe there could be an error in what you're seeing. So your own senses are more trustworthy, and you need to be paying attention, and you need to be in the three-dimensional real world, not in this two-dimensional representation. That triggered a memory of hearing the anthropologist Wade Davis just a few months before speaking about wayfinding, about what was happening in the Pacific Ocean, what had been happening in the Pacific Ocean. And that got us talking. Then the rest of that cruise, and then since then, every time we've been together, we've been intentional. And this is not just when I'm sailing, this has really become an important teaching for me in just navigating life as a soul story, not just a sailing story for the ocean or on a boat, but in this body, in this life, in this experience, how to make decisions, how to notice why I'm doing what I'm doing, how to not get trapped in a bubble of perception, but to keep expanding my sensory awareness, and to pay attention and to be alive and alert and actively engaged in what's happening around me, and using the full range of possibilities, that some of them that have been desensitized and numbed down in me by this society we live in. Here's a remarkable part of this story. I was using, satellites and the computer screen, and relying upon them to tell me where I was and what was happening around me. The Pacific Ocean experience, what we call now known as Polynesia, Micronesia, Melanesia, all these names that have been assigned now through the colonial experience. But on a deeper level, we'll just talk about the Pacific culture itself. There was no computer screens. There were no satellites providing, trigonometry and being able, and telemetry, and being able to know, where you were referencing off some type of external technology. There was no maps. There were no maps, no charts. There was nothing sketched, nothing drawn on paper or on the side of the boat, or there was no magnetic compass, this wonderful floating magnetic needle in liquid that points to north. So how did people know where they were going? How did they find their way? How did they voyage to islands they didn't even know existed? I have my certification in coastal navigation, and it's so dependent on, using my parallel ruler and my chart, and constantly, fixing, like finding my location with my bearing compass, or using landmarks. But what about the open ocean, where there is no land? And we know now some of these voyages were 40 to 50 days with no land, crossing all sorts of different latitudes, different weather patterns, different trade winds. They did it with, and they continue to do it, and continue to share and to learn now, just with deep attentiveness, profound awareness, called deductive reckoning or dead reckoning, just to be able to know where I've been, how I got here, what vision I'm holding, what is coming up over the horizon, what does the air taste like, what do I smell? Beyond my visual field, what does the boat feel like in this moment? Am I in the groove? Am I on the bearing? Am I on the heading? All right. So that's my initial story, my story. And I do want to say one more thing to it, is that I started collecting navigation books after this whole experience on John's boat. And then I got invitations to go to the Hawaiian Islands, and been 3 trips there now, and met some of the navigation community and doing some shared learning with them. And I'll say more about that on in the more expansive story time coming up. Okay, so I'll just pause there now. Thank you.